as far as out in the world. Uh, I still just I have this overall great optimism and faith that just like no matter what, everything's gonna be okay. Not a cynical um person at all. And like the last few weeks, I have been diving into different facets of social media and interacting and finding new uh people to follow or listen to, and it's just been interesting to learn and see how the different generations and specifically Gen Z. Um, I'm a millennial, and then how the opposite side of like social media, how we see it was like such a negative thing, but as of late, I've been seeing like what you guys were all just talking about, how we need to tap into our creativity to find, and I look at all these Gen Zers online, and something that I've certainly struggled with is tapping into my creativity. Like, yeah, it's social media, but they're still tapping into that creative energy, and it just was like nice to make that connection and see that like, should all else fail, there's still that energy that they know how to tap into, and I think that they will use it in other ways for to shift things, to help
Hmm.
things shift.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it's just an interesting dynamic and connection
It's
to
what you're talking about is a collective of energy.
right.
Just exactly what we have been talking about, that people come together within on a platform. It's very difficult for you all to find people of like mind within your neighborhood. It's much easier when you're putting it out there in front of a billion people or more. So you actually gain the dynamics of interest. But the whole thing, and here's what we would have you look at if you really want to understand it and you really want to appreciate it. We look at it with perspective, look at it holistically, look at it from the dynamics of where it has come from in the 80s and the 90s, and around 2000 things really began to shift and change in that sort of way. And the social media and the social networks became more around the change of the millennium and all of that stuff. And so there has been a whole dynamic. Now, the just like humanity are basically, what shall we say? How can we put this delicately? Um, the in the dynamic of a society where back in the set many some of you are not old enough to remember, but back in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, there was a whole dynamic of freedom, of expression, of rebellion, of movement that basically was one that was outside the dynamics of the set. And the computers and social media began to eat into the status quo of what used to run your world, which was government, right? And so, where all of a sudden you had a very limited input of information now, and it wasn't all of a sudden, it was kind of gradually, but step by step, it was a situation where, people were developing a new understanding of freedom, a new understanding of communication. And the problem was that, just like in many other things, those that are motivated by, what shall we say, more prurient motivations, basically said, "Oh my God, we have a free platform," and then so you began to have global pornography, and you began to have all of that other dynamic of energy that came up, and you have, but you also have breaking off people of into certain groups of people that had shared goals, had shared interests. And so that dynamic, so there was a more purient side of the dynamics of social media, because it's basically what's social media about. Social media is about creating that dynamic of interaction electronically that you find it impossible to have physically because everyone is spread out so far and everyone is, there is not that opportunity. If how many of you have real close personal friends anymore where you wind up seeing your friends 3, 4, 5 times a week? There used to be a dynamic of energy where most of you did that, especially if those of you that have old college friends and things like that, where you just wind up, it's not happening as often, perhaps the older you get, but um, so what we're trying to say is that there has been an evolution, there has been a transformation in social media, so that it's coming back around now, and Generation Z, but also the millennials are looking at the dynamics of energy and are beginning to utilize AI and computers and all of that stuff in the ways that they were always intended. That if you really want to see an example of that, you look at the Doge people.
Mhm.
Okay, these are a bunch of anywhere from 19 to 35-year-olds that really are computer wizards and really created an algorithm before the election that allows them to go in and tap the algorithm into the budgets of every one of these government organizations, and in no time at all have a readout of all of the good stuff, all of the bad stuff, all of the fraud, in other words, it traces the whole dynamic of all the money. And this can happen in some of these agencies within a couple of hours. So it's like, it's gone beyond the dynamics. Like someone came in with a superpower and said, wow, here's the whole thing. No, you said and it's taken that 70 years of bureaucracy and really, in many, many ways, has threatened that bureaucracy more than it has ever been threatened before. And that's all through the dynamic of social media. And social media, in its own way, is more pure than anything that is being trying to be censored. You have somewhat X is pretty good, but X isn't perfect. You have any number of other independent ones, and the key is to, look for new ideas, look for out of the box thinking. What the trumpet just did with Gaza and the whole thing around Gaza. No matter that might have freaked you out, in many ways, but it was intended to do that. It was intended to freak those people out that have been locked into that bullshit dynamic for so many decades. And so it was intended as to create a dynamic of a possibility that was outside the box and so outrageous
It's
that
beautiful.
it was genius in its inception. So, but that's a prime example of that show.
Yeah.
It's a prime example of that new way of thinking, that new understanding. Because now the question is, what are they going to do with it from this point? Because what they have done is they have stripped away all the pretense. All right. So all of the dynamics are now standing naked in front of you. The question is, what are they going to do? What are you going to allow to be done? How will you allow your voice to be heard? So much of the dynamics of energy that have happened and are happening are basically because are organized groups out there that are basically using the government switchboards to flood them with calls around things, and all of a sudden, you put out something on social media, and you can all of a sudden have a million people calling the Senate and the congressional telephone lines. So then that sort of response is actually getting a response from the government.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
go ahead.
I mean, it's been very interesting to see, like you just said about Gaza. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to see who's going to step up and what we're going to do with it. and it's almost like a test to see if we're going to continue to do the same old things or if we're going to do other things and do better, do good. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting to see that dynamic on social media as well, how people are like all up in arms about this. And then I'm like, well, and then I see the Gen Zers that are like, well, we could do this, this, and that. And then I'm seeing like the millennials and older that are some of them who, would typically be more open-minded, that are still kind of up in arms about these things. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. What can you pull positive from it? It was just interesting to see that, like,
It's a
a lot
beautiful
of the people,
reflection.
uh, you know, elected Trump into office, that I just feel like a lot expected this, like, whoa, immediate golden age transfer. Like, no, we're still gonna have tests. We're still gonna throw shit at us, and it's like testing our discernment and which direction we're gonna go.
Right.
And ultimately, like, he wants the power to go back to the people, to each one of us. Well, are we recognizing and cognizant of that power, like, truly, like, that? Are we using our discernment? Like, are we ready for this? And I believe that we are, but we're still sorting through the BS.
Yeah, we actually do believe you're ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be Generation Z that saves you.
I know. I see it. I see it. I see it.
It's a very interesting thing. They have some miracles up their sleeves.
They do. There's some brilliant minds, very creative minds. I'm excited to see what they're
Yep,
going
yep, yep, yep. All right, good, good.
to do.